The North Atlantic Oscillation is a climate pattern that I've talked about in some of my videos since it has such a direct effect on the weather on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, most noticeably in the autumn and winter. So now that we are just a day away from the winter solstice, I thought this would be a great time to refresh your memory on what the NAO is and how it actually affects the weather in Europe, before connecting that to my latest forecast for the next few weeks as winter officially begins. The North Atlantic Oscillation refers to the fluctuation in strength of two atmospheric pressure entities, specifically the subtropical high-pressure system in the Azores vicinity and the subpolar low around Iceland. As of today, December 20th, we're in the positive phase of the NAO, characterized by a stronger Icelandic low and Azores high, leading to a greater difference in atmospheric pressure. This typically leads to a stronger and more zonal jet stream crossing the Atlantic Ocean, bringing lots of rain, wind, and milder air to northern Europe, while areas further south are drier. For reference, this NAO phase was very prevalent last winter, which explains the abundance of rain and damaging windstorms we saw from Ireland and the UK all the way to the Scandinavian peninsula. Now, the negative NAO phase, on the other hand, is arguably much more interesting. We see a weaker than average Icelandic low and Azores high in this case, which means the atmospheric pressure difference between them is smaller. This causes a more variable jet stream, so Europe tends to see a less pronounced and persistent westerly influence. This, in turn, can mean less rain and mild Atlantic air being pushed into the continent overall, and if other favorable atmospheric conditions are present, this could allow for more outbreaks of cold air across Europe and North America. There's obviously more to it than that, but that was just a quick explanation about how those two NAO phases can significantly affect the weather. So now the big questions are, what should we expect for the rest of this month, and when will the negative NAO phase return? As many of you have probably noticed, the current positive NAO is bringing some of the conditions that we would expect, such as an abundance of rain in the north as well as widespread above average temperatures, but in this case, drier conditions in the south won't apply as much, especially from Italy and areas to the east, and this is because the large and strong anticyclone over the Atlantic is going to allow for rain and even colder air down into the central Mediterranean, followed by a more significant wave by Monday of next week. This is definitely making for a much more active next few days, but this is also a good opportunity to point out that weather doesn't follow an exact formula based on a specific phase of a climate pattern we may be in, so even though we typically see similar effects depending on what NAO phase we're in, there are many other factors that can also have an effect, so it's not always going to be the same. By the middle of next week, it's possible that the high pressure over the Atlantic is going to shift much more into Europe, leading to a more stable pattern for most of us, which may actually remain intact for the rest of this month, while the NAO is still in a positive phase. So when can we expect some changes? The black line on this graph shows the observed NAO progression, and you can see how it has fluctuated between the positive and negative phases over the last few months. Also, the red lines show the forecast by different ensemble members. The interesting takeaway from this graphic is the noticeable trend towards a negative NAO returning by the beginning of January, and this is being supported by the majority of those individual forecasts. With this in mind, this gives me reason to believe that at least the first half of January is going to bring a different weather pattern compared to what we've seen recently, and what we're going to continue to see for the remainder of 2024. But remember that this is nearly 2 weeks away, so any details about potential cold waves, snow chances, and other factors are highly uncertain and not guaranteed. If you have any further questions or concerns, feel free to leave them down below, and consider subscribing if you're new to the channel. You can also join my Discord server where you can submit your photos to be featured in an upcoming video. Thank you all for watching as always, and I'll see you on the next one.